All right, welcome. This is the Convictions Podcast. I'm Brandon Coluccio, your host and guide on this journey as we talk to some incredible people and learn about their adventures through life, business, failure, and success. On this show, we discuss the topic of catastrophic failure because we realize that failure brings pain, and with pain comes the opportunity to harvest wisdom. Our goal for this show is to inspire and humanize people who have overcome huge setbacks and use those lessons to launch themselves to new heights that they never thought imaginable. Remember, every failure is a golden opportunity to harness the chaos of your life and to propel yourself forward. All right, let's dive in. Today's guest is one of my great friends. I wanted to have him on the show because he's someone who has battled his way through enormous struggle and failure in his life, but somehow always manages to do it with a certain panache and style. Our guest is a first-generation immigrant. His parents are immigrants from Pakistan, and his family never had much in terms of financial wealth. But determined to make it in life, our guest found himself working in finance for some of the world's largest and most prestigious banks, including JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Then in his mid-20s, deciding he was ready to make the jump from corporate finance onto the roller coaster of entrepreneurship, in 2016, he started a marketing firm that nearly bankrupted him. But keeping with the theme of the incredible people we have on this show, he did not let this failure stop him. And since then, he has gone from having to sell his most prized watches just to pay the rent to a multi-millionaire real estate investor, entrepreneur, and someone who never stops giving back to his community and those around him. He was awarded Minority Business Leader of the Year and 40 Under 40 by the Philadelphia Business Journal. He's a managing partner at FMC, a real estate development firm that builds 100 to 200 single-family homes and over 500,000 square feet of commercial real estate every year. But his entrepreneurial and community focus don't stop there. He's also the president at an education technology startup and the co-founder of a healthcare company. He sits on the board of 3 nonprofits, CareLink, Justice for Our Neighbors, and Down North Pizza. In addition, he's co-founded 2 nonprofits of his own, Friends for Good and Down North Treehouse. I want to give a really warm welcome to our guest and my friend, Momin Sheikh. Momin, thank you for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited about this.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind intro.
You like that, man? I spent hours and hours on that.
Thanks.
Some of it's true, I promise.
Some of it, you get some of the things right.
All right, man. So look, I don't know that the people who are hearing this are going to know much about you. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So it'd be awesome if you could just kind of give a quick version of your story, kind of where you came from, some of the things that you've gone through. And if you could, for me, just try to highlight some of the struggles that you faced in life, some of the feelings you may have felt and kind of how you worked your way through them.
Sure. Yeah, happy to, man. And I think struggle might be a little bit different than failure. I think I've had both, but not uncommon to other people in my situation. I was an immigrant. My parents came here in the early 90s. I was about 4 or 5 years old. And we came not knowing much, man. You kind of just float around and you're kind of at the mercy of the people around you. If you're fortunate enough to have people or organizations around you that help new immigrants, your life could be substantially better. And we really didn't have that. So we struggled for quite a while. My mom worked at McDonald's. My dad was a security guard, and they tried their best. I'm very, very grateful for the sacrifices they made. But it kind of leaves you, me and my siblings, to kind of fend for ourselves, right? Your parents, they don't know much. They grew up in a different time, in a different country. So and they help you as much as they can, but you're kind of left to figure things out on your own. Right. In addition to just being new, not having money, adds to a whole other level of struggle, right? I think I moved 8 times before I graduated high school. So you constantly move neighborhoods, you move schools. And I think that adversity, and this is my belief, and I really believe this is, it either makes you or it breaks you. You either grow from adversity or you let it be your demise. And I chose to, whether I was doing it subconsciously when I was younger, to build from it. I'm really good at making friends today. And that's because I moved around a lot as a kid. I can make really smart financial decisions. It's because we didn't have much growing up, and you have to figure out, if you only have $10, what's the best way of spending it? So I've always looked at my struggles earlier on in life as something I could build from, and that theme has continued even to today.
Yeah. And so, you know, how did that kind of translate like into your early career? And, you faced a lot of issues like kind of with your entrepreneurial quest, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you could kind of talk a little bit about that and talk about some of the things that you faced, from one kind of getting over like making that jump into entrepreneurship from, you were someone who by most definition, right, had a excellent career trajectory. You're making really good money. You're working, you've got the big name bank on the resume, right? Like you had all these wonderful things. What led you to make that decision and that move into entrepreneurship? And then, kind of walk us through some of the feelings that you had once you did make that jump.
Yeah, totally. So I'll preface by saying I went into finance. I decided I wanted to do investment banking when I was a teenager because I wanted to make money. And I think one of the really a shortfall of growing up without means is whereas most people have the opportunity or the luxury to think big and think about what they want, what brings them fulfillment and joy and happiness. I just focused on what would make me money.
Yeah.
Up until I was 27, my career goals, my career moves, everything I did was for the advancement of my career. And I did pretty well at that. I think when I left Wells Fargo, I was the youngest senior RM vice president in the entire East Coast for the role I was doing. And I was at Wells Fargo for 6 months. I got a phone call from another institution that was recruiting me. And up until then, I had always switched. If I was at a place for a year or two, another place called to recruit me, I would make that move because it's more money, it's a title,
Sure.
it's more prestige. And I remember having a thought, and they were like, I was like, I'm only been here for 6 months. Why would you, what's the point of moving now? And they were like, well, it would give you more money, it would give you a stronger title. And I was like, aside from money, what else would I want in my next role? And that was like such a big epiphany for me because up until 27, I realized that I didn't make any career moves thinking, beyond just more money and a better title. And I remember I was like, man, that it was life changing. Like aside, and then I had this epiphany that so many people in this world never get beyond just that point. Aside from putting a roof over my head and food on the table, what else do I want out of life? And people like my father, I feel like still, or at least until then, never made those decisions. Aside from providing, what else do I want in life? And I decided right then that the next business idea I come up with, or business I see to acquire, I'm gonna like run with it. And fast forward another 6 months, I quit my job and I had launched a few months prior to that America CMO, which was essentially a creative agency and a strategy agency to help nonprofits grow. I wanted to do something that was fulfilling and meaningful, and it was my first nonprofit. It was my first startup that I quit my job for, and I was making really good money at. And for the first year of doing it, we did really well. I think I was at 6 employees within the first 6 months.
Yeah.
What people didn't see was that I had 6 failed startups prior to that. Since I was 18, I was working on ideas. I never quit my job for them, but I raised money for them. I put business plans together. I got clients. There's 6 other ideas that didn't work out before this one started to work out.
Yeah. And I love that, right? I mean, that's what everybody doesn't see. That's what most people don't talk about. That's why I'm doing this show, right? Because I want to show the behind the scenes, the pain, the struggle that people don't see, right? And so maybe give me a couple examples of some of the things that you went through with maybe a couple of those failed startups, right? What were your biggest disappointments?
You learn, and I think it's important. You have to learn from each of them. You have to look at every mistake you've made, every failure, and you have to do your next venture better. I think Rocky Balboa has like the line, like it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get up. And it really didn't make sense to me. I just thought it was like another cheesy line until you live through it. Because every time you stand up, you're just a little bit starter, right? So I think my first start, I was like 18 when I had my first company. It was Helios Energy Group. I was aiming to put solar panels on people's homes and businesses. And you learn a ton, right? You learn just from terminology, raising money, what contracts look like, you know. And I was fortunate enough that I was in my early 20s the first time I got like screwed by someone. And I learned those lessons really early. I was like, all right, I wasn't 30 doing a startup and then learning that, you know, some people could be really shitty. So it's important, you know, to vet them this way and to ask these type of questions and to, you know, formulate contracts so they have, you know, these criterias. And I learned that really early. So I'm so grateful. And then, you know, raising money from someone to give, you know, to give a 22-year-old $100,000 to like start a company, like, you know, might not be a big deal for some people, but for me, it was huge. Poor kids who has this idea and someone's like, all right, cool, man, I believe in you enough to give you $100,000 of my own money to run with it. And then, you know, making the decision like, all right, cool, this isn't going to work out. But if I, you know, complete these last 3 sales, I can make just enough money back to return the investor all their money. And then, you know, in their eyes, I'll still be good. So I think it was a series of learning something from each of them, whether it's about yourself, whether it's about people, whether it's about business, whether it's about finance, whether it's about marketing. I think the more you do it, the more you learn from it. I think the biggest teacher was when Meraki CMO itself was failing. That was, you know, that was really getting punched in the face. So that was a disappointment, unlike any of the other ones.
And so that, you know, that's kind of the one that, you know, I know the most about because I was with you through it, and we would spend a lot of time together talking about it, and I know how difficult it was for you, right? And so like maybe failure doesn't always happen overnight, right? You sort of, it's almost like a lagging indicator. You're sort of like, oh shit, this isn't working, right? And you continue to try to push forward and make it work because that's your entrepreneurial spirit. That's your decision to try not to fail. But at what point did you come to where it was like, okay, this is decision time, this thing's come off the rails, right? Like at what point did that happen, and what did you do next?
I think it was a series of small mistakes that left me exposed, right? So we were making a lot of money and I was spending a lot of money. You know, I thought because I went to school for finance, I worked in banking and finance my whole career, I really thought I understood banking and finance, and I really didn't. You know, you grow up, and this is not an excuse, it's just my reality is I didn't have anyone around me to teach me personal finance. It's not something you learn in school. You know, I learned corporate finance, I wasn't saving like I should. I didn't have backup plans. I didn't have credit facilities the way I should. So when there was a massive downturn in whatever I was doing, and it just turns out it was cyclical. Most marketing companies don't make any money from January to March, April. There's just no new contracts. You know, companies start the new year. They focus on a lot of other things before they get to marketing. And the first year I made it fine, just because I had a ton of momentum. And my second year of business, we went into January. I lost for a number of different circumstances, lost half my revenue overnight. So here I am. I have employees. I have this lifestyle that's kind of ridiculous for someone in my position. The amount of money I was spending. And I didn't have the safety net. So I went 6 to 8 months without making much money at all. And it was absolutely miserable. You don't make smart decisions when you're on your back. So, you know, as you mentioned, I remember eventually going to a pawn shop, a jeweler, and selling all my watches so I could make payroll the next day. I remember surrendering my car, selling my motorcycle, downsizing my apartment. And it's funny too, because just a few months prior to that, you know, I was, you know, taking a private jet to the Bahamas. Right. So a ton of lessons learned there. But when I was going through it, 6 to 8 months, and most people don't know this, I filed bankruptcy paperwork. I borrowed $1,200 from a friend to pay an attorney to help me file bankruptcy. I paid the attorney, I filled out all the paperwork, I took a state mandated online course, And literally days before I submitted the actual paperwork, that was notarized, something in me just told me not to do it. And I'm so glad I didn't. And what really saved me was I had a number of friends in my corner, including yourself, that believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Right? Imagine being so broke. I mean, I have borrowed money from every friend at this point. Every credit card's maxed out. I'm not spending any. My like spending is down to zero.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make ends meet. I had bought my parents a house a few years prior because I was doing well. So I can't let them know, right? I still have to cover their mortgage. I bought them a car. I still have to cover that. I have employees that, they rely on me, and I had to let most of them go, but the one or two I kept just to keep operations going. They have to get paid before I do. I had people in my corner who wouldn't let me fail, who believed in me even when I was like, I'm filing bankruptcy, I'm moving to Costa Rica, I'm like, I'm gonna go live on the beach for 6 months, figure my stuff out, and then maybe I'll So I think having a network of individuals who believed in me as a person, as an entrepreneur, who were in my corner, really helped me through that situation. And I learned a ton from it. And the biggest lesson I learned, I'm so grateful for it, and it didn't make sense when I was going through it. Once you fail, once you're totally on your back and you stand up from that and you do something else that makes you successful, you go into your next venture feeling invincible. There's no dream, there's nothing I can accomplish, because the worst thing I could do when I start a new venture is fail. And I know what that looks like. And I know that a year after that, I can make $1 million doing something else. So if you approach, ideas with that confidence, and the confidence of like, all right, I have failed big before. I know what not to do. And the more you do it, you figure out what to do. So now I approach ventures with just so much more ammo and so much more confidence. And I'm so grateful it happened to me when I was 30 and not, when I was 50. I'm so grateful that I have the confidence now to just pursue anything, because the worst that's going to happen, I've already lived through. And I made it just fine. And, I started something else that made a killing. But I wouldn't have had that same confidence had I not failed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to approach new ventures with the confidence had I not, seen the absolute bottom.
Yeah, there are so many gems in what you just said. It's unbelievable. But really, I think like the overarching theme there is that it's almost like that process of creative destruction of your own ego, right? The process of failing destroys your ego, but it destroys a part of your ego that probably should have died in the first place or shouldn't have been there. And then you're kind of eventually molded into making better decisions and becoming a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the people that come along with you, I mean, it's easy. I learned so many life lessons during that time. And I as you know, used to go out quite a bit. And I remember a friend telling me, he was like, it's easy to be your friend when you are spending the type of money you spend. It's who doesn't want to go to the restaurants you want to go to and, do all the things you're doing when it's just fun and laughs. And he was like, your true friends are the people that are with you when you're on your back. And it was such a great lesson, that the amount of time I was spending with individuals that really just were there, to help me spend money, really aren't in your corner. And I'm so grateful I learned that lesson. Then a tough lesson to learn, but I'm so grateful, I get to live my 30s and pursue the rest of my life with those lessons learned then. It was a great way to weed out, because I had so many people, it was such a great way to weed out the bad and just keep the gems around me. And other life lessons, I think friends open up their wallets for you. I remember being broke, and a friend of mine was like, hey man, do my website for me. Like, I grew into a full service creative agency. I was like, you need a website? He was like, no, man, I know you need the money though. So here's some money.
Yeah.
And then I went to other friends. I was like, hey man, like, let me like do some marketing for you. Let me create a social media strategy. Let me rebuild a brand for you. And people were like, I don't need it. And then I was like, but I need it. Are we really friends if you have millions of dollars and I'm going broke and you're not helped? Are we really friends then? Because I would do the same thing for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, man. We used to have a ton of conversations about this. You and I would meet over a bite. We'd sit for hours, and you would talk about the ledge. I remember you were getting married in Santorini, and that's when I first told you. I was like, "Listen, I'm not coming." And you kind of, I remember you saying, "I was like, I don't have the money." And I remember you said something like, "You're wearing a $2,000 suit," and I was like, "Dude, I do not have the money. Plus, like, what would it look like to my employees and vendors that have taken a vacation when I'm literally struggling to pay everyone?" And you're like, there's only 30 people going. It's my closest people. I expect you to be there. It's in 2 weeks. And then I remember probably like 2, 3 days before you left for Santorini, we met again. And you were like, "Hey, man, I noticed on the hotel block, you didn't book a room yet." And I was like, "No, man, seriously, I'm so broke. I literally can't afford a plane ticket. I can't afford anything." And you were like, "Take the money from me." And I was like, "I can't, man. I can't take the money from you." And you said, "If you were in my shoes and you just sold your company and I was broke, wouldn't you pay for me to go to your wedding?" I was like, "Absolutely." He was like, and you were like, "Why wouldn't you let me do that for you?" It's tough to accept things when you're just the type of people we are. And I remember leaving that dinner thinking about it, and I got like a PayPal, notification that you had just forwarded me, enough money for a plane ticket, hotel to get myself over there. So it was having people in my corner. I had other friends who did that, Haroon, Reda, Mike Dubit, a ton of people who did that because they believed in me. I borrowed so much money to keep myself afloat, and I paid it all back. But it just the people I kept in my circle who were like, "All right, man, you 27, you did something we didn't do. You quit your job. You made a ton of mistakes, but you did do something great. I believe you're going to do it again, man. Here's the money. Pay me back whenever you get. There's no interest. There's not. Just pay me back whenever you have it. Get back on your feet. By the way, you're not going to Costa. I was set on going to Costa Rica, and my friends were like, "Nah, man, we're going to figure it out here. You're going to do something." Yeah.
And also like that, it's funny you mentioned that dinner. You were like, "I literally cannot pay for this dinner." And I was just, what I loved about it was the fact that you were just honest, right? You were just kind of like, "You know what? This is the reality of my situation." A lot of people delude themselves, and then they delude other people by lying to themselves. And by the time they face reality, catastrophic things have already happened, and now you're trying to fix it. And what I appreciated about you was, look, you were kind of open, and you just said, "Look, this is a bad situation. I'm in it, and kind of here's where I'm at." And I think that being honest with yourself when you're in the midst of a difficult situation, instead of burying your head in the sand like a lot of people do, that is a bigger step than most people realize, right? And so I guess to kind of segue into the next question, like, what was some of the self-talk that you were having? And I'm not trying to go down a dark path, but like, just kind of highlight for anybody else who's listening who might be in that moment right now, right? Like that self-talk that you did, both the negative, okay, telling yourself things you shouldn't be, and then the positive self-talk that you told yourself to try to rebuild your thought process.
Yeah, and that's tough, right? Because for 6 to 8 months, it was just negative, right? I didn't
Yeah.
have anything good to say to myself. I just, there wasn't. Oh, there'll be better days. It's just when you're in it, you don't believe there are. You don't believe in silver linings. You don't believe there's, the lights before the darkness. You don't believe in any of the wisdom that's been passed on for generations, which really is true. All I thought was like, there's homeless people out here. So it's nice to say it's, darkest before dawn and there's a silver lining. But I'm like, explain that to a guy who's homeless. It was when I got out of it. It was surrounding myself with people who did that talking for me, who were, and the talking was, "Listen, man, you got to believe in yourself." And today I approach ventures with just belief in myself. If the people who are struggling, if you were bold enough to quit your job and start something, if you don't quit if you're bold enough to start something, if you're eager, if you're ambitious, if you were bright enough to come up with an idea, tell your network about it, put your money where your mouth is, and pursue it, you're going to be bold enough to do it again. And even a broken clock is right twice a day. Again, man,
Yeah.
it was my 7th startup that made me real money, which was Marikai, and which eventually failed as well. It was my 8th venture, my 8th venture that, made me some serious money. Um, and I don't, if you're thinking like, hey man, some people have the luxury of rich parents and they have something. I didn't have that. And not only did I not have parents to fall back on, I bought my parents a house. I was paying their mortgage. So it's not like I had someone to fall back on. I still had to make enough money to pay their mortgage. So, if I can do it, anyone can. And people are much smarter and brighter than I am. But if you're struggling, know from a guy who's actually done it not long ago, that if you are on your back, but you have what it takes to start a business, quit your job, do all that, you have what it takes to bounce back from your situation. Be honorable to yourself, and be honorable to your investors, your clients. There's not a single vendor that can say to me that I didn't pay them. There's not a single employee that can say to me that I've not paid their salary. So I wanted to focus on being honorable because I knew I was young, and I knew eventually I would do something again, and I didn't want to do it in a city where I had developed a reputation of not being an honorable person. So you could fail while still being honorable.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many gems. I can't wait to actually like break this down and transcribe it. There's just so much wonderful information here, man. And I appreciate you being so open about it.
Yeah, no worries.
And so, what if you had to highlight that one thing that you learned about yourself, and maybe let's just focus on the Marikai situation, because there's lessons in each of them that you've learned about yourself. But what was the most important thing that you found about you when going through that experience that has helped you since?
Learning where your shortcomings are and surrounding yourself with people who fulfill that need or make you better at them. You have to really test your ego, man. You have to put your ego aside and say, hey, I'm not good at this, this, this. I'm just not. And those are things required for me to be successful. You can't listen. Maybe there are some people out there who are good at everything. I know I was, right? I wasn't strong at operations. I wasn't, I was great at bringing clients in the door. But if I focused more on putting the product out, then I wasn't bringing clients in. So I was spreading myself thin. I surrounded myself with really good people. I've always done it. I do it more so today. And a lot of the people in my life today are the guys that were with me then. Peter Master Giacomo is like a brother to me. He owns a creative agency. We met at a dinner one time. We were sitting across from each other at the table. He owns a fairly successful creative agency. I'm sitting across from him. I've been operating this for a year and a half now, and I'm telling him about what I'm doing. And I was like, I just landed this client. They're a multinational billion-dollar firm. And he was like, how'd you do that? I was like, this is just something I was good at, is bringing in the clients. He was like, what are you doing for him? I was like, well, my first project is, this animation video. They have the budget. I asked him for this. And he was like, how the fuck are you going to deliver that in that timeline for that money? That's not possible. And as we talked through it, I'm like, fuck, man, you're right. I think I really fucked up here.
I might have just bit off more than I could chew. Yeah.
I bit off way more than I could chew, and I didn't charge enough money for it. So I remember at the end of the dinner, Peter looked at me and he was like, you know what? You're a real motherfucker, but I like you. Call me Monday and I'll help you. And that was the first of many, many things Peter did for me. And Peter eventually, I brought back Marikai by landing a few big clients right before I filed bankruptcy. I got a few big clients, and then I essentially sold the company to Peter. And Peter took on those clients. He paid me more than I deserved to be paid. He finished out their contracts, and he essentially bailed me out. And today we're still good friends, and we still do a ton of business together. So surround yourself with good people, and good people isn't necessarily their technical know-how, is their character. Invest in character. When you're picking partners, invest not just in their abilities, but in their character. When you have good times, you want someone to share that with, and when you have bad times, you want someone to share that with. Today, one of the biggest lessons I've learned, at least for myself, is I will not do a single venture without partners, at least one partner. And the partner, people say don't do business with friends and family. I only do business with friends and family. I don't do ventures alone. I want to share in that success. If there's a downfall, I want someone who has my back. I want someone who I can bounce ideas off of. I want someone I trust. And I have a fair level of confidence that the ventures I'm doing now, whether it's in tech or healthcare or other real estate ventures, I have this confidence that they're going to be successful because I've seen how to do it unsuccessfully. And I've done it successfully a few times now, that I know what it looks like. And I want people in my corner to share that success. And, God forbid you fail again, I want people who are intelligent enough and agile enough to help me work through it, to save it, to rescue it, to pivot from it. Yeah. All that came from failing. I would not have learned that had this venture or any of the ones prior to it been a success.
Yeah. And so I have a question here, and it's really, we've already answered it, but I have to kind of reiterate it because it's just everything you're highlighting. And so have you found success or failure to be more important and more impactful, in your personal growth? I mean, you basically just gave the answer, but
it's failure, man.
Yeah.
It is. I encourage everyone to fail, man, especially if you're young, man. If you're in your 20s, there are not many bad decisions. Don't take that out of context. For business, you could do anything, man. You could. I switched jobs so many times in my 20s, and people, the guys that graduated college used to bust my balls. Like, hey, man, again, you're doing something else, and you're starting a creative agency. What do you know about that? You're going to real estate. What do you know about that? Like, try as many things as you can.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to fail. Learn passion. Learn work ethic. Surround yourselves with mentors. I, till this day, have a mentor. I say just everyone. I've had different ones, but I've had one since I was a teenager. It's people I sought out. It's people I put the work into. It's people I've asked to help me. And I mentor people today. I always give it back. I try. And anytime I see someone who's ambitious and puts in the effort to reach out to me to learn about real estate or anything else, I've never said no to anyone. Listen, I'm 33 now. I still have a mentor, and I hope I have a mentor forever. You want someone who knows more than you, who has some of your best interest in mind, someone you could ask candid questions to, and who will help you. And if you're diligent and hardworking and have whatever it takes, those mentors will probably eventually put you on. They'll figure out something for you to do, for you to make money. I have my mentor now, Sean Frankel, who's like a brother to me. He's my dearest friend. We run almost all the ventures I do together now. We were on the real estate side together. He brought me in on, he taught me the world really, and I thought I knew something. I knew nothing, real estate development. But now when I'm doing this tech company, he's my partner there. When we're doing this healthcare company, he's my partner there. And he still serves as my mentor. There's something I learn from him all the time. So I encourage everyone out there, find a mentor. And I know a lot of successful people today, and I know if someone reached out to them, even, blindly, cold on LinkedIn, and put together a compelling reason and put in the work of like, hey man, you're in this field. I really want to learn about it. Can I take some of your time to ask you questions and learn? I don't know a single one of my successful friends that would say no to something like that.
Yeah. I mean, you highlighted a few things about fear, right? Is what you're talking about. So a lot of people are afraid to start because of a couple things, right? But it all comes down to fear at the end of the day. The fear is, oh, well, what if I fail? And here you have a guy who's been through numerous failures. Don't be afraid to fail. I've been through significant failure. Don't be afraid. You will get through it, right? The other thing is, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Show a little humility, right? Kind of put the ego to the side, like you said. Find somebody who is the picture of who you want to become and go try to be friends with that person, right? Like, do everything you can to gain mentorship.
Yeah. I think Steve Jobs said this, and Sean, Franco says this all the time. Some of the most powerful words in the English language are, can you please help me?
Yeah.
You get so much more by putting your ego to the side and saying, can you? And I do that all the time. Lenders, investors, developers. I am constantly asking for help, and in return, I'm constantly helping them and other people. And they're just, most good people don't say no to that. can you please help me figure out a solution to this? They want to see, when I ask, and I want to see other people put in the work before they come to me. I'm not here to just give out answers. You got to put it, I want to see that you've put in the work. I want to see that you've put in the time and you have some serious questions, or you have a goal you're working towards that I can help you with. And that's what I do when I approach someone for help, or approach someone with a problem. There's a solution I already have at least started in my mind that I could discuss with them to let them know that I'm serious about the time they're giving me. And it's the same thing when someone asks me for help. I want to see how much, what you're willing to put in as well. I'm not going to drive to your house and just give you game. I want to see that, you've put in some work too.
Right. You want to see skin in the game. You want to see that emotional investment in it, right? I'm going to make this work or I'm going to die trying, right?
Yeah. And surround yourself with good people, man. Surround yourself not with the people. It's easy to be your friend when you are on top of the mountain. It's when you're on your back, you know who your friends are. And I'm grateful I learned that lesson early. But some of those guys are still my close friends, business partners today. So if there's anything, surround yourself, partner up with people that know things you don't, and that have your back.
I think that those are just incredible points. But I want to kind of go in a little bit of a different direction real quick here before we finish up. So I think it's natural to try to avoid failure, right? And Charlie Munger kind of has these like wonderful little quips where he says things like, collect the embarrassments of others so you can learn vicariously through their failure, right? And so, if you're thinking about it that way, and people are listening and they're concerned about failure, what are some things that you can do ahead of time? What are some landmines? One, so I guess it's a two-part question, kind of what are the landmines to look out for? And what types of things can you do to sort of mitigate the downside if in fact you do fail?
Sure. I think saving, when you go into a venture, don't spend money, man. If you are starting a company, live well below your means and start saving money, but start putting money to the side because you're gonna need it for growth, operations, employees, failures. If I had, even half the money I should have been saving at the time I was going under, I probably would have been in a much better situation. Learn. I don't think you need a formal education to do anything in entrepreneurship. I think whatever you want to learn is available online for free. There's someone who's done it and there's someone who's willing to teach you for free. Everything from every aspect of your business, whether it's marketing, whether it's accounting and finance, whether it's invoicing, whether it's sales, whatever it is that you want to learn, that you need to know is online for free. There's no excuse for not knowing it. So go in knowledgeable, go in with some money set aside or saved. I don't think you need a ton of money to start a business. I think that's a hurdle people just artificially place in front of themselves. I've started many of those companies with $100 of my own money, or $150 just to get it incorporated. You don't need websites and business cards. You could, if you have an idea, if you have something you want to pursue, you could do it ahead of time. And then, the way you structure your contracts, I wish I had more long-term recurring revenue contracts. And I'm trying, I guess it'd be specific to whatever business someone's starting. Personally, those are the things I would have done. I would have saved more. I would have lined up some credit facilities. I would have had longer term contracts. I would have learned more about the business I'm doing. It's tough to call yourself a pro at anything nowadays. We do really well real estate development, but there's a dozen guys within 2 miles of here that probably know much more than I do. There's guys that know much more than them. So constantly learn, constantly involved. That's and then again, surround yourself with people who have your back and your best interests.
Yeah. All right. And so I've got one more kind of question or talking point, but before I jump into that, do you want to kind of share where people can contact you if they'd like to?
Sure, man. LinkedIn, Momin Sheikh, is probably the best way. Or you can just shoot me an email if you want, momin@fmcliving.com.
Awesome. All right. And so, you've now, and anybody who's achieved a certain level of financial success has felt this, at least the people that I've talked to. You sort of get to a point where you're like, okay, now what? right? This is it. I can go buy a Rolex, I can go buy a nice car, I can go on vacation. I can pretty much afford just about anything I want, right? Within reason, of course.
Sure.
What is it that keeps you moving and keeps you motivated? Because at some point it doesn't become about money anymore, right? And you're a guy who's very involved in the community. So what is it for you that keeps you moving forward, despite the fact that any one of the things that you're working on, and you're a busy guy, any one of those things could fail, and you know that, right? Or it
Sure.
could be massively successful, but you probably don't necessarily need the cash, right? What is it that keeps you
Yeah.
going in life?
It was the great 21st century philosopher Kanye West who said, "Money's not everything. Not having it is." So I think until you have some money, all you think about is making money. And if you're in your 20s, early 30s, money will come. I haven't even hit my the years of earning my best, and I haven't even hit those years yet.
Right.
One of the best pieces of advice I've ever received was, life is whatever you make it. And this is from my dear friend and cousin, Haroon Kamal, who was with me the entire journey. I borrowed a ton of money from this guy. Life is whatever you make it. If you want any life you imagine for yourself, you can have. I grew up, broke, and I was the recipient of charity and people's kindness. Today, that's a huge part of my life. I don't want to be known as a guy who's made a lot of money. When I die, I don't want to be that's the guy who who's a billionaire, who owned that property. I want to be the guy who helped people. Um, and that's why I'm involved with these like great nonprofits, right? Whether they're around mental health, which is super important to me. I lost my best friend to suicide in my 20s, so mental health is huge for me. So I sit on Carolyn Community Support Services, free legal advice. When we came to this country, there was no one there to help you figure out how to become a legal citizen. It's a much more complicated process than people think. So I sit on the board of justice for our neighbors. Down North Pizza, which is a mission-based pizza restaurant where we help formerly incarcerated individuals learn job skills. Huge in Philadelphia, huge for helping the community we're in. And then the nonprofits that I own, Friends for Good, social philanthropic, a group of young professionals that volunteer at a new place to raise money or awareness every single month. And then my latest one, we're starting a youth development program called Down North Treehouse, which will essentially be a coding camp for individuals out of high school who can't afford to go to college to learn a real job skill, and we'll line you up to get a real tech career, a career in the tech sector that pays a real salary, gives you health insurance. And I think that's one of the most impactful ways of ending the cycle of poverty. So if you can close your eyes and imagine whatever life you want in 5, 6 years, 10 years, whatever your goals are, that's totally possible. And I'd like to be, a guy that is known for being compassionate and, fun loving, and who's helped better the lives of the people around him and in his community. If I'm being totally honest, I've always been very charitable. That it wasn't as important to me until I made some money, until my bills were paid, until I had the things I wanted. You don't have the capacity to think of the things beyond yourself. So make some money, and then let that not be your goal in life, because there'll always be people with much more money than you, no matter how much money you make. It's the one thing you could chase forever and you'll never get enough of. Instead, focus on what you have. Focus on what you have, you'll always have enough. Focus on what you want, you'll never have enough. So I approach life and I approach business with a ton of gratitude. There's a ton of things I could be sorry for. There's a ton of complaints I could have. There's a ton of opportunities where I could say life is or wasn't fair to me. So those guys get to do it, but I don't. Mm-hmm. Don't make excuses for yourself. The world does not care about your excuses. If you look back on your life and you're unsuccessful, there's not an excuse I'm willing to accept, at least not for myself. The world does not care about your excuses. If you want something, you have to have the hunger and the drive to go and do it.
Yeah, and I think that's just, I hope that the people who listen to this hear the same thing that I hear, right? Which is a guy who has come from not much, who has chased dollars, who has failed over and over and over again, who has finally found himself success, but who has the presence of mind to know that this isn't the end, right? This is really the beginning of your journey, right? Which is what, focusing on what motivates you, and that is helping other people. And so, I hear just such a great story of why it's so important to push through failure, right? Because what you're going to do and what you're already doing for your community through all your nonprofit efforts is far more impactful than any of the financial success that you'll ever create, right? And that is why, if somebody needs a reason why they should push through something, to me that's a beautiful example of why you should push through it, right? And so I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and for being so open and honest about everything. It's not always easy to talk about this kind of stuff, right? It's often, a lot of people are embarrassed by it. I don't think they should be, but many are. And I just want you to know how grateful I am, man. So I really appreciate it. Keep pushing. I'm so proud of you. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more about all the interesting stuff you've got going on, because I'm sure there will be
Thank you.
more. So,
I appreciate you, my brother.
all right, brother. Thanks.